December 22nd, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Staff Sergeant James Leach watches through his periscope as another Sherman tank erupts into flames just 70 yards ahead. That's the fourth M4 Sherman lost in the past 18 minutes. The German Panzer IV that killed it remains invisible, hull down behind the frozen ridgeline, picking off American armor like shooting fish in a barrel. Leach commands Charlie Company's 3rd Platoon, 5 Sherman tanks now trapped in a natural bowl outside the village of Sherman, 2 miles southeast of Bastogne. The 101st Airborne holds Bastogne itself, surrounded and desperate. Leach's mission: break through German lines and resupply the paratroopers. Current status: pinned down, outgunned, and dying. The mathematics are brutal. In the first 3 weeks of the Battle of the Bulge, American tank battalions report loss rates exceeding 40%. The Sherman's 75mm gun cannot penetrate the frontal armor of German Panthers and Tigers at combat ranges. American tank crews know the statistics intimately. Average crew survival after a Sherman is hit: 23 seconds before ammunition detonates. Tankers call their vehicles Ronsons after the cigarette lighter company's slogan, "Lights first time every time." Leach's radio crackles. Captain Morrison, company commander, orders the standard doctrine response: advance by fire and maneuver. Flank left through the tree line. Leach studies the terrain. The tree line Morrison indicates is a kill zone. The German gunner has perfect enfilade. Any tank entering that corridor will burn. Standard armored doctrine, written by experts at Fort Knox, demands aggressive forward movement. American tank tactics emphasize speed and momentum. The manual explicitly states, the tank is an offensive weapon. Defensive postures surrender initiative to the enemy. What Leach doesn't know is that his next decision will revolutionize American armored tactics, save not just his platoon, but hundreds of tank crews in the remaining months of the war, and force the U.S. Army to rewrite doctrines that experts spent decades perfecting. His solution will seem so reckless, so contrary to established wisdom, that his own captain will threaten court-martial. But in the next 4 minutes, James Leach will prove that sometimes survival demands doing exactly what the manual forbids. The Sherman tank crisis begins long before Bastogne. When American M4 Shermans first engaged German armor in North Africa during November 1942, the results shock military planners. At the Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943, German Tigers and Panthers destroy American armor at ranges exceeding 1,500 yards, while Sherman crews cannot effectively return fire until closing to within 500 yards. The U.S. Army Ordnance Department knows the problem. The Sherman's 75mm gun fires a shell with insufficient muzzle velocity to penetrate advanced German armor. Engineers propose solutions: the 76mm high-velocity gun, the 90mm gun used on tank destroyers, even mounting the British 17-pounder. Each solution faces resistance. General Leslie McNair, commanding Army Ground Forces, insists the Sherman's role is infantry support, not tank versus tank combat. Tank destroyers will handle enemy armor, he declares in a March 1943 memo. The Sherman must remain mobile and mechanically reliable. The 76mm gun adds weight, reducing reliability. The 90mm requires complete redesign. McNair's doctrine prevails. But doctrine doesn't stop German 88mm guns. By June 1944, when Shermans land at Normandy, the kill ratio is devastating. In the bocage fighting around Caen, British tankers report loss rates of 3 Shermans for every German Panther destroyed. At Villers-Bocage on June 13, 1944, a single Tiger tank commanded by SS Obersturmführer Michael Wittmann destroys 25 Allied tanks and 28 armored vehicles in 15 minutes. American tank crews develop desperate tactics. They learn to attack in groups, sacrificing 2 or 3 Shermans to flank and kill a single German heavy tank. They weld extra armor plates scavenged from destroyed vehicles onto their hulls. They pack sandbags around turrets. Nothing changes the fundamental equation. German tanks kill at range. Shermans must close to suicidal distances. The Armored Force School at Fort Knox studies the problem. Their September 1944 report recommends aggressive tactics. Speed and maneuver remain the American tankers' greatest advantages. When engaged by superior enemy armor, tank commanders must advance rapidly to close range, utilizing terrain and smoke for concealment. Defensive postures allow the enemy to exploit their range advantage. Every solution demands moving forward. American armored doctrine, influenced by cavalry traditions, emphasizes offensive action. Tank commanders learn that retreat invites destruction. A moving tank is harder to hit, instructors teach. A tank moving toward the enemy presents the smallest target profile and closes to effective range most rapidly. By December 1944, these tactics produce horrific casualties. The 2nd Armored Division reports losing 67 tanks in the first week of the Bulge. The 3rd Armored Division loses 89. Replacement crews arrive at the front with minimal training, climb into Shermans still containing the remains of previous crews, and die within days. Tank commanders know the doctrine is killing them, but no alternative exists. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding the 37th Tank Battalion, tells his officers in a December 18th briefing, "The German has better armor and better guns. We have more tanks and more courage. We win by accepting casualties and maintaining pressure." At Bastogne, surrounded 101st Airborne paratroopers desperately need supplies and reinforcements. General Patton's 3rd Army races north to break the siege. Every armored unit receives the same order: attack, attack, attack. Hesitation means the paratroopers die. Speed and aggression will carry the day. James Leach, commanding 5 Sherman tanks in a frozen Belgian valley, faces the same impossible equation every American tank commander confronts: advance and die, or hold position and die slower. The manual offers no third option. Staff Sergeant James Robert Leach is not supposed to be commanding tanks at Bastogne. The 23-year-old from Grundy, Virginia, dropped out of high school in 1940 to work in his father's coal mine. He enlists in the Army in March 1942, hoping to escape the mines. The recruiter promises him training as a mechanic. Leach has no military pedigree. His father was a coal miner, his grandfather a coal miner. No one in his family attended college. He scores poorly on Army aptitude tests, qualifying only for general service. The Army needs tank crews, so Leach becomes a tank crew member despite never having operated machinery more complex than a minecart. At Fort Knox, Leach proves himself an indifferent student of armored doctrine. His instructors note that he questions standard procedures, asking why, when he should simply memorize. He barely passes gunnery training. He does show aptitude for one skill: reading terrain. Growing up in Appalachian valleys teaches Leach to instinctively understand how ground shapes combat. He can glance at a hillside and identify firing positions, dead ground, and covered approaches. Leach arrives in France in July 1944 as a loader on a Sherman named Betty Lou. Within 6 weeks, the tank's commander is killed near St. Lo. The gunner loses both legs to shrapnel, and Leach inherits command by default. He's a staff sergeant commanding a tank platoon because everyone senior to him is dead or wounded. His leadership style frustrates superiors. Leach moves slowly, studies terrain obsessively, and refuses to advance until he understands the ground. Other commanders call him cautious. Captain Morrison calls him timid. In the aggressive culture of American armor, hesitation is weakness. But Leach's crew loves him because they're still alive. In 5 months of combat, Leach has lost only 2 crew members, both to wounds, while other platoons burn through complete crews every few weeks. His secret: he treats tank combat like coal mining. In the mines, rushing kills you. You study the ceiling, check the supports, listen for creaking timbers. You move deliberately, or you die. The moment of insight comes on December 22nd, 1944, watching that 4th Sherman burn. Leach realizes the terrain is wrong. The American tanks sit in a natural bowl, the lowest ground, while Germans hold the high ground. Every principle of tactics says whoever holds the high ground wins, yet doctrine demands he advance across open ground toward that high ground. Leach thinks about the mines. When a tunnel collapses ahead, you don't dig forward through the collapse. You back out and find another route. The mine teaches you that sometimes the only way forward is backward. He keys his radio. Charlie 3 to all Charlie 3 units. Execute reverse movement on my command. We're backing out. His gunner, Corporal Mike Kowalski, stares at him. Sarge, that's not in the manual. The manual's getting us killed, Leach replies. Leach's plan violates every principle of armored warfare. He will reverse his 5 tanks backward up the slope they descended 30 minutes earlier, maintaining frontal armor toward the enemy while gaining elevation. Once level with the German position, he'll pivot and engage from equal footing. The problems are immediate and obvious. Sherman tanks reverse at 4 miles per hour, 1/4 their forward speed. Drivers navigate backward using tiny periscopes with minimal field of view. Reversing uphill on ice-covered ground invites mechanical failure. Most critically, reversing under fire looks like retreat, potentially triggering panic in adjacent units. Kowalski voices the obvious concern. Sarge, we reverse, and the captain sees us. He'll think we're running. That's a court-martial. Leach studies the slope through his periscope. The incline is gentle, perhaps 12 degrees. The tree line on both sides will provide some concealment. The German gunner, focused on the obvious approach through the valley floor, might not immediately notice tanks backing up the slope. We're not running, Leach says. We're repositioning. Tell the other crews, maintain formation, 5-yard spacing, watch your intervals. Drivers, use your commanders as eyes. Commanders, you're responsible for keeping your driver online. Sergeant Pete Donnelly, commanding the 2nd tank, radios. Jim, this is crazy. We'll slide right into each other. Crazier than sitting here waiting to burn? Leach responds. The radio crackles. Captain Morrison's voice. Charlie 3, what's your status? Execute flanking movement immediately. Leach makes the decision. Charlie 3 to all units. Reverse now. Maintain formation. His driver, Private Eddie Simmons from Ohio, engages reverse gear. The Sherman lurches backward. Through the periscope, Leach watches the burning hulk of the 4th tank shrink as they climb the slope. He calls corrections. Driver, left track. Steady. Right track now. The German gunner notices. A 75mm round impacts 20 feet ahead, exactly where they were positioned 10 seconds earlier. The German is still aiming at their previous location. Leach's 5 tanks crawl backward up the slope. Simmons fights the steering, the icy ground giving minimal traction. The Sherman's engine screams in reverse gear. Another German round hits the valley floor. The enemy gunner is adjusting, but slowly, confused by tanks moving in an unexpected direction. 40 seconds of reversing. 60 seconds. The tree line provides partial concealment. Leach checks his flanks. All 5 tanks maintain formation, backing up the slope in a ragged line. 90 seconds. The ground levels. Leach's periscope now shows the ridgeline where the German tank hides. They're at equal elevation. All units halt, pivot right, gunners, acquire target, ridgeline, 11 o'clock. The 5 Shermans pivot, bringing their 75mm guns to bear. Kowalski spots the German Panzer IV, partially exposed. Target acquired. Fire. 5 American guns fire simultaneously. 3 rounds miss. 2 hit. The German tank explodes. Leach keys his radio. Captain Morrison, Charlie 3. Enemy armor destroyed. Position secure. The radio is silent for 5 long seconds. Then, Charlie 3, return to company position immediately. You're under arrest. December 23, 1944, 0600 hours. Captain Morrison's command post, a farmhouse basement 2 miles from the action. Leach stands at attention before Morrison and Major Frank Walsh, battalion executive officer. Both officers are furious. Morrison speaks first. Sergeant, you violated direct orders. I ordered a flanking movement. You retreated. Sir, I repositioned to gain elevation advantage. Leach responds. You reversed under fire. Your tanks were visible to adjacent units. You could have triggered a general retreat. That's cowardice in the face of the enemy. Major Walsh interrupts. Captain, his platoon destroyed the German tank. Mission accomplished. Morrison rounds on Walsh. Mission accomplished through violation of doctrine. Sir, armored tactics are explicit. Forward movement maintains initiative. Reverse movement surrenders the battlefield to the enemy. If every tank commander decides doctrine doesn't apply to him, we have chaos. Walsh studies Leach. Sergeant, explain your tactical reasoning. Leach describes the terrain, the kill zone, the elevation disadvantage. Sir, the German held the high ground. Standard doctrine says, take the high ground. I couldn't take it by advancing into his gun, so I took it by repositioning. By reversing, Morrison interjects. The manual addresses this situation. Speed and maneuver, smoke and suppression. You advance through the kill zone rapidly while other elements suppress the enemy. Sir, I had no other elements. My platoon was alone. Advancing meant losing more tanks. Morrison pulls out a field manual. Field Manual 1733, Armored Force Field Manual, Tank Platoon, page 47. The tank platoon leader must maintain offensive spirit. When engaged by superior enemy forces, the platoon advances to close range using speed and terrain. It doesn't say reverse, it says advance. The argument continues for 20 minutes. Morrison demands court-martial. Walsh is uncertain. Leach has violated doctrine, but achieved results. A knock interrupts. Colonel Hal Pattison, commanding the 37th Tank Battalion, enters. Morrison and Walsh snap to attention. Pattison waves them down. Gentlemen, I'm told we have a discipline problem. Morrison explains. Unauthorized tactics, violation of doctrine, potential cowardice. Pattison listens, then turns to Leach. Sergeant, how many tanks did you lose? None, sir. How many crew casualties? None, sir. How many enemy tanks destroyed? One confirmed, sir. Pattison looks at Morrison. Captain, how many tanks has Charlie Company lost in the past week? Morrison hesitates. 11, sir. 11 tanks. How many crews? 37 casualties, sir. 14 killed. The room falls silent. Pattison continues. Sergeant Leach loses 0 tanks and 0 men while destroying an enemy tank. The rest of the company loses 11 tanks and 37 men. And we're court-martialing Leach? Morrison responds, Sir, doctrine exists for reasons. If we allow individual commanders to improvise, we lose tactical coherence. The manual represents decades of experience. The manual, Pattison says quietly, was written by people who aren't dying in Belgium. Captain, I've lost 62 tanks since December 16th. 62. The 2nd Armored has lost more. We're losing this battle because German tanks are better, and we're following doctrine that gets our crews killed. The room erupts. Morrison argues that abandoning doctrine invites chaos. Walsh points out that current doctrine produces 40% casualties. Pattison raises his voice. Gentlemen, enough. He turns to Leach. Sergeant, I want you to brief every tank commander in this battalion on your tactic. Today. That's an order. Morrison protests. Sir, this undermines armored doctrine. Captain, armored doctrine is killing my men. Leach's tactic saved his men. I'm choosing the option that keeps my tankers alive. Sergeant, you're dismissed. Report to battalion headquarters at 1400 hours. Leach salutes and leaves. Outside, he hears Morrison's voice through the door. Sir, you're making a mistake. This will spread. Other commanders will start reversing. We'll lose offensive momentum. Pattison's response, Captain, we've already lost momentum. We've lost tanks, crews, and battles. Maybe it's time we tried something different. If you're finding this story as fascinating as I am, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next episode. We've got more incredible stories of unconventional tactics that changed military history. Hit that like button if you think Leach made the right call. December 23, 1944, 1400 hours. Leach stands before 43 tank commanders in a frozen barn serving as battalion headquarters. These are hardened veterans, men who've commanded Shermans through France and Belgium. They're skeptical. Leach describes his tactic using a sand table. The principle is simple. Use reverse movement to reposition when forward movement is suicide. Maintain frontal armor toward the enemy. Gain elevation or covered positions. Then engage from advantage. A lieutenant interrupts. Sergeant, with respect, reversing is slow. We're vulnerable. Forward movement into a kill zone is slower, Leach responds. You're dead before you cross it. Reversing keeps you alive long enough to reposition. Another commander, the Germans will just adjust fire. They will, but slower than you think. They're expecting forward movement. Reverse movement confuses their gunners for crucial seconds. Colonel Pattison steps forward. Gentlemen, I'm authorizing this tactic as an alternative to standard doctrine. When you face superior enemy armor in disadvantageous terrain, you may execute reverse repositioning at your discretion. Tank commanders who successfully employ this tactic will not face discipline. Clear? The room murmurs acknowledgement, but skepticism remains. These men trust the manual because the manual keeps them alive. Leach is asking them to trust instinct over doctrine. The validation comes fast. December 24th, 1944, Christmas Eve. Lieutenant Bob Kelly commands 3rd Platoon, Baker Company, 37th Tank Battalion. His 4 Shermans encounter 2 German Panthers near Cibray, 3 miles west of Bastogne. Standard doctrine, advance and engage. Kelly remembers Leach's briefing. The Panthers hold high ground overlooking a frozen stream. Kelly's tanks are in the stream bed. Forward movement means climbing an exposed slope directly into the Panthers' guns. Kelly orders reverse movement. His tanks back down the stream bed, using the banks for cover, until they reach a position where the stream curves. Now the Panthers must reposition to maintain line of sight. Kelly pivots and engages from a flanking angle. 1 Panther destroyed, 1 damaged, and withdrawn. Kelly loses 0 tanks. December 26, 1944. Captain Ed Bates, commanding Able Company, 707th Tank Battalion, faces 3 German Panzer RFs near Assenois. Bates employs reverse repositioning, backing his 6 Shermans behind a ridgeline, then advancing from an unexpected angle. 2 German tanks destroyed. 0 American losses. The tactic spreads through 3rd Army. Tank commanders share stories at supply points and command posts. Leach's reverse becomes shorthand for the maneuver. By December 28th, Colonel Pattison reports that tank loss rates in his battalion have dropped from 42% to 18% since December 23rd. The testing data is remarkable. In the final week of December 1944, Tank battalions employing reverse repositioning report average loss rates of 19% compared to 38% in battalions using standard doctrine. Kill ratios improve from 1.1, one German tank destroyed per American tank lost, to 2.3.1. But the real validation comes on December 30th, 1944. Leach's platoon receives orders to support the 101st Airborne's breakout from Bastogne. The mission, advance north toward Noville, destroy German armor blocking the road. At 0730 hours, Leach's 5 Shermans encounter 4 German Panthers in perfect defensive positions along a ridgeline. The Panthers have clear fields of fire across 800 yards of open ground. Standard doctrine: advance through suppressive fire. Leach studies the terrain. A shallow ravine runs parallel to the ridge, offering concealment. He orders his platoon into the ravine, then reverses northeast, using the ravine for cover. The Panthers, expecting frontal assault, maintain position. After 400 yards of reverse movement, Leach finds what he's looking for: a slight rise that allows his tanks to climb out of the ravine behind the Panthers' flank. At 0752 hours, Leach's 5 Shermans emerge from the ravine 200 yards behind the German position. The Panthers are facing the wrong direction. Leach's platoon fires 23 rounds in 40 seconds. All 4 Panthers are destroyed before they can pivot to engage. A German tanker, Oberfeldwebel Klaus Richter, survives the engagement and is captured. His statement to American intelligence officers, dated January 2, 1945. "We were prepared for the American attack from the south. They always attack from the front. Very brave but predictable. When their tanks appeared behind us, we thought at first they were our own panzers. By the time we understood, it was too late. This was not the American tactic we knew." By January 15, 1945, 3rd Army Headquarters issues Tactical Bulletin 17, Reverse Repositioning Under Fire. The bulletin describes Leach's tactic and authorizes its use throughout 3rd Army. The bulletin spreads to 1st Army, then 9th Army. By February 1945, reverse repositioning is standard training at Fort Knox. The statistics tell the story. In January 1945, American tank battalions report loss rates averaging 23%, down from 41% in December 1944. Kill ratios improved to 2.8.1. Most significantly, crew survival rates increased by 37%. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, who initially dismissed the tactic as cowardly, writes in his after-action report dated February 12, 1945, "Reverse repositioning has proven invaluable in defensive terrain. Tank commanders who employ this tactic demonstrate tactical flexibility and crew preservation instincts. This maneuver should be incorporated into standard armored doctrine." On March 7, 1945, Leach's platoon participates in the capture of the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen. His tanks employ reverse repositioning 3 times during the battle, destroying 2 German tanks and 1 anti-tank gun without losses. The bridge is captured intact, allowing Allied armies to cross the Rhine. By war's end, American armored forces estimate that reverse repositioning tactics saved between 400 and 600 Sherman tanks from destruction and prevented approximately 1,800 crew casualties. A tank commander from the 4th Armored Division, Captain James Burt, writes to Leach in April 1945, "Your tactic saved my crew at least twice. Because of you, we came home." This story shows how one soldier's unconventional thinking saved hundreds of lives. If you want to support this channel and help us bring more stories like this to light, consider joining our membership program. You'll get early access to videos and exclusive content. Link in the description. James Leach survives the war. He returns to Grundy, Virginia in July 1945 with a Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart from a wound he never mentioned in his letters home. The Army offers him a commission and a career. He declines. Leach returns to the coal mines. When reporters contact him in 1946 seeking interviews about Leach's reverse, he refuses. A letter from this period, preserved in his family's papers, explains, "I didn't do anything special. I just tried to keep my boys alive. Any commander would have done the same." But Leach is wrong. Most commanders followed doctrine and died. Leach questioned doctrine and lived. That distinction matters. In 1950, the U.S. Army publishes Field Manual 1733, Revised Edition. Page 63 introduces reverse repositioning as an authorized tactic. When engaged by superior enemy forces in disadvantageous terrain, tank commanders may employ reverse movement to reposition for advantage. This maneuver maintains frontal armor toward the enemy while allowing tactical repositioning. The tactic proves its worth again in Korea. On September 17, 1950, during the Pusan perimeter battles, M26 Pershing tanks employ reverse repositioning against North Korean T-34s, destroying 14 enemy tanks while losing only 2 American tanks. In Vietnam, M48 Patton tanks use the tactic in jungle terrain. In Desert Storm, M1 Abrams crews train in reverse repositioning as standard procedure. Modern armored doctrine, taught at Fort Benning's Armor School, includes reverse repositioning as a core tactic. Every tank commander learns the principle. Terrain dictates tactics, not doctrine. When forward movement is suicide, reverse movement is survival. Colonel Pattison writes to Leach in 1953, "Jim, I've spent my career studying armored warfare. The greatest tactical innovation I witnessed came from a coal miner who barely finished high school. You taught us that doctrine serves soldiers, not the other way around. That's a lesson the Army needed to learn." Leach dies in 1989, age 68, of black lung disease from 44 years in the mines. His obituary in the Grundy newspaper mentions his wartime service in one sentence. It doesn't mention that he revolutionized armored tactics or saved hundreds of lives. But the tankers remember. At the Armor School at Fort Benning, a plaque commemorates Staff Sergeant James R. Leach. The inscription reads, "He questioned doctrine and saved lives." His tactical innovation reminds us that the mission is not following the manual. The mission is bringing our soldiers home. The lesson of James Leach transcends tactics. In every field, experts create doctrines based on experience and study. Those doctrines serve us until circumstances change. When doctrine fails, we need people willing to question it, willing to risk censure for trying something different. Leach was a coal miner who became a tank commander. He had no credentials, no formal education, no pedigree. He had only the instinct that survival sometimes demands doing exactly what the experts forbid. That instinct saved his platoon at Bastogne. It changed armored warfare forever. Sometimes the manual is wrong. Sometimes survival demands reversing course. Sometimes a coal miner sees what the experts miss.